I'm Tiffany Besonen. I'm an artist, an art teacher, and I live in rural Wadena County, uh, south of Monaga, south of Park Rapids, on a farm that has been in my husband's family for 115-ish years. My art practice is really a variety of mixed materials, and my studio times are really in spurts. And because I'm a teacher, summertime is a time when I can dedicate more to studio time. I use a lot of mixed materials. So, there are some traditional kinds of materials with paint and drawing and traditional clay sculpture. But I get most excited about repurposing things into sculpture mainly, but in other ways. But yeah, so
isn't that like a tire?
yes, this is a shredded tire right here that I things that are dropped in my path, like on the side of the road and sometimes right in the middle of the road. Yeah, so that's always difficult for me to explain what my main materials are, because it's often worn materials that, I love rusted things and worn things and vintage items and, old boxes that can become kind of like shadow boxes.
How has your process evolved over the years?
It's evolved a lot. I was thinking about this recently, how it's evolved, but everything comes around. So in college, I spent a lot of time with sculpture, and then I kind of went away from sculpture for a while because of space. Sculpture takes up a lot of space, and sometimes materials can be expensive unless you're getting them on the side of the road, but it has evolved in after college. It was some photography, a lot of drawing, a lot of painting, and then it's kind of come back around to mainly sculpture, but then mixed materials, two-dimensional mixed materials. So some photography thrown in there on top of, then painting on top of that, so it's hard to categorize what I do, but I have fun.
Yeah. So. Well, you recently said you submitted a couple pieces to a show.
Yeah.
That you're going to go see.
Mm-hmm.
What was that, in sculpture or?
Those are sculpture. Yeah. Okay. So those are sculptures that are in vintage boxes.
Okay.
And one of them does have the tires, a shredded tire piece in it. And yeah, again, mixed materials. One of them has a root that I found, and some of my journal pages that I wrote that I did not want family members to read. Some anxious, bad thoughts, but then, the hilarious thing is that, I read it and I'm like, oh, I wrote this a year ago. I don't really feel this way anymore. It was good to write it. I don't want family members to read it. I'm going to tear it up. And then it came, I'm like, wait a minute, I can use this, So I think I want to use everything, ephemera of life, in my work.
Well, that's the next question. I mean, do you follow any rituals or routines when you're in the studio or in the field when you're working? I mean,
yeah, I'm pretty spontaneous with what I use and what inspires me. So probably not too many rituals. And I gave out coffee, so I don't even have that. Mornings are good, but any time of day. So I'd say, and especially now that my children have grown, I used to have to schedule times in, and now it's just whenever I'm available and whenever I'm inspired, and, is when I'm making art.
Yeah. You'd said it's a bit sporadic because of finding the time.
Right. With teaching full time during the school year. But then, I feel guilty when I say that because my students inspire me a lot. And, so I'll be demonstrating to them or they'll have an idea. And, so teaching does feed my practice for sure. Just not as much time to finish work during the school year. And sometimes during the school year, I will bring my work in and I'll say, I'm not done with this. I'm frustrated with this. What do you guys think? So that's a pretty cool process when they can see like, oh, it doesn't come easy for her either. It's this process, this art process is hard for professionals. It's not supposed to be easy to make stuff that doesn't exist before you start.
So I think you've covered this last question I had, which was what challenges do you often face in your creative process? And probably finding time is
huge. And space. This studio here is an old farmhouse that was in my husband's family for 110, 15 years. And when we lived here, space was a real issue. I did rent some space for a while in Park Rapids, and I would use my classroom. I would use my kitchen. I have some great photos of me using the kitchen. And my daughters must have known, don't touch that or else, when they were little. They're in their 20s. But yeah, space for sure and time. But now I have a little more space and that's great. So, you have to appreciate those things as you get them and make the most of it when you don't have those things.
So how does living and working in this Heartland Lakes region influence your work?
It does a lot. It's a huge inspiration for me. And I grew up just west of Park Rapids, 20 miles west of Park Rapids, on a sheep farm, a beautiful area. And sheep are in my work. But growing up on a farm probably is how I dare to use the tools that I do in making sculpture, especially. But nature has always been a huge influence. So for me to not have to live even in a town anymore and where I do, but then the Heartland area has so many artists, and that really, having that fellowship of artists really does keep a person going. The inspiration of nature and connection to family, and then definitely the connection to the other artists who are part of this area.
You've kind of answered this, but are there any particular landscapes, towns, spaces, or consistently appear in your art?
Popping up. I guess, as far as landscapes go, I wouldn't say that I'm a landscape artist,
right? But
definitely the idea of place influences my work a lot. And, there's a lot of places I love. I love New York, I love Minneapolis, but I choose to live here. And one of those reasons is because it's so inspiring and whether or not you can see the direct connection, I'm not sure, but for sure I grew up on a farm, on a sheep farm, and taking care of those sheep. It was a kind of an isolated place to live. You don't always appreciate it while you're growing up in a place that's far from your friends, but I really appreciate it now. And, and I think some of that longing to go back to those younger days, it pops up in my work quite often.
So you also touched on this a bit. How does community, either physically or artistically, play a part in your practice? I
helped start Studio 176 with the help of Jeremy. Got it all rolling, and that was huge to me. That was a great connection to Park Rapids, close, specifically the Park Rapids community. But I try to do that in my classroom. I try to create a community in my classroom, and I have an after-school art league, And that definitely is a community of students. And so it's great to have that for myself too,
Yeah.
you know.
What first inspired you to start making art? And what inspires you?
You know, I was always a creative kid, and my mom let me make messes, which was so great,
Yeah.
you know, and I didn't, of course, at the time appreciate it, but then I look at how particular some mothers are, and I think, and you know, I tried to do the same for my own kids. I tried to give them the space to just do their thing and explore. And so I think, you know, I didn't even realize I was making art when I was little. I was just experimenting, and that's what I still love to do. I just love to experiment. If something turns out great. The other day I was a little frustrated. I was working outside, which is kind of nice with sculpture. You can work outside more. And yesterday my husband's like, "How's it going?" And I'm like, "I might be wasting my time." And you know, he kind of from me knows, he's like, "Hey, you're experimenting. Don't put pressure on yourself." You know, but I've said that myself, that yeah, I just love to be in that space of experimenting with materials and ideas and images, you know. I don't know if so how did I originally get into art? It was, I keep going back to this specific time in high school where I was sitting in calculus class and frustrated and going, how am I going to ever use this? Why am I here? You know, I had reached my math peak. I wasn't going any further than that. And it hit me like I could be in art class right now. Instead of and nothing against math. My brother is one of my brothers is an engineer, but I could be in art class right now. I could be doing what I want right now. And I think that was the time when I realized I might want to do this forever.
Yeah.
You know, I think I need this, you know.
Are there any artists, writers, musicians, or traditions that have shaped your perspectives or work?
What artist was I thinking about earlier? Oh, Joseph Cornell he made, you know, he's kind of a sculptor, kind of came from more of a theater background, I believe, or at least theater set background. And he was a little bit of a hermit, but he has some really interesting writings, and he would fill, you know, box forms with basically a scene, basically some kind of a story. And you know, that was really interesting to me. There's Kusama is really inspiring. Oh my gosh, there's so many artists. There's so many female sculptors that really, you know, I love to follow them. They're, you know, they're a lot of living artists. I love to follow them online and see what they're up to. And I have two important mentors. You know, in college I had a lot of mentors, but Hazel Belvo is a pretty important Minnesota artist, and her work is in the Minnesota Museum of American Art. And I would go up to be mentored by her in Grand Marais for many summers in a row. And then Lynn Speaker took over after Hazel semi-retired. Hazel's still making art. She's in her 90s.
Wow. How do history or cultural memories show up in your work?
I'm really inspired by vintage materials.
Yeah.
So I am fascinated with where did this come from and what is the history behind it.
Right. The patina.
Probably. Yeah. And I'm Finnish American, and the design company Marimekko is a mid-century kind of modern aesthetic, and I think that has influenced me a lot. Even though I'm using, you know, I'm probably not as streamlined as most mid-century modern with my work, I do think that has inspired me a lot. The basic graphics and the mid-century, you know,
color,
modern
line,
yeah, right.
Why do you feel compelled to make art?
I just have to do it or I get sick.
Right.
I do. I just, I start feeling mean and sick and it's kind of hard to explain except for a lot of other artists understand that when I have this vague sick feeling, like, what is wrong with me? I'm like, oh, I haven't made art in a while. So I just need to get experimenting again and no pressure, just start making and experimenting and see what happens.
Play.
Mm-hmm.
What stories or emotions are you hoping viewers take away from your work?
A lot of my work is about connections and disconnections. So sometimes, the disconnections in life, like say our failure to recycle or issues with environmental issues, I do want to communicate. Sometimes it's subtle, but connections with people, connections with nature, that's really keeps me going. So again, sometimes it's kind of subtle, but sometimes I am telling a story and I'll share the whole story. But you don't want to spoon feed people either.
No.
You do want them to finish the story
Right.
with their own story.
How do you define success and fulfillment in your artistic life?
So that's probably the thing that's changed the most from being a young artist to now. And I think that of course you want to show your work. Of course you'd like to sell your work. Of course you'd love to be admired but I do think that part of me feels successful because I just keep making it. There's a lot of roadblocks in life that prevents you from making work or affects your confidence to make more work or motivation. But, I feel successful if I can just keep making art. It doesn't have to always be good or the best, but if I can just keep making it, I hopefully until I'm 90 something, I'll still be making art.
What's next for you?
I would love to have a show in the Twin Cities in Minneapolis area. But again, like if I don't have that deadline of a show, I still want to keep making work. It does help to get deadlines. It really makes a difference in finishing things for sure. But I do want to do some bigger scale work, like possibly some sheep made out of these shreds of aren't these interesting?
They're cool.
They remind me of water. They remind me of roots.
Yeah.
And, obviously they're shredded tires, but they kind of look like something from nature. So I think black sheep may be in my future. We'll see. Sometimes, if you're too set on one goal, you might be ignoring some other possibilities. So I don't want to limit myself, but yeah, black sheep may be in the future.
My heart is bursting from my chest. I can't sit still or I surely will be killed by cardiac arrest. I cannot hang out as you might have guessed. Can't bring myself to give you my best. I cannot hang out as you might have guessed. Can't bring myself to give you my best.